Hello everyone, in this video I'll be covering my tips on playing Discipline Priest on the Mythic Queen Azshara encounter. Much like a lot of the previous bosses, this role on this fight is closer to a sub DPS than a healer, where you're just there to use barrier at the right times and provide a little bit of healing here and there, but really focus on putting out as much burst damage as possible on certain parts of the encounter. For talents, I recommend the standard talents with Sensitive Many and Purge the Wicked, but there are good arguments on taking Luminous Barrier over Evangelism, although I don't really recommend it. Most of the periodic damage that the raid receives during this fight will be healed by your Holy Paladin, so Evangelism loses a little bit of value. And the most dangerous parts of the fight, where people might get one shot, isn't because the damage is ridiculously high, but because our max HP is low, which means that the amount of damage a barrier absorbs is similar or a little bit less than the amount of damage that Luminous Barrier would absorb. And Luminous Barrier doesn't have the requirement that people be stacked. It's definitely better for surviving some of the more difficult spear detonations in phase 3, but for overall healing and surviving the overload damage in phase 4, I think Evangelism still wins out by a decent margin. For Trinket, I definitely recommend Cyclonic Blast. There are a lot of points in this fight where burst damage is very useful, and this Mechagon Trinket provides more burst damage than any other trinket that you can equip. For the second trinket, healing output trinket like the first sentence, Void Stone, and things like that are very good. But if that healing is not necessary, it might be a good idea to go double DPS trinket, with the second DPS trinket being Leviathan's Lore if you have it. For essences, I recommend Crucible for Major, since it provides a lot of burst damage, and mana really shouldn't be an issue on this fight. For minor, there's a lot of different options that you can take depending on what you need, but some of the good choices are Well of Existence, Memory of Lucid Dreams, Whirl Vein, and even ones like Vitality Conduit can be very good. Again, mana or healing are generally not the issues on this fight, so I would just take whatever minors that you are most comfortable with. The only time the raid takes a lot of damage in phase 1 is the first set of orbs that you need to soak. Right before the orbs come out, there is a spear, and there will be another spear right after the orb, so I recommend using both your Shadow Fiend and Evangelism here. However, right before that is a beacon, and if you're the target of this beacon, you obviously can't ramp early enough to cover the first spear damage as well as the orb soaking. But I would still ramp as soon as you're out of the beacon, and you should be able to cover the last end of the orb damage as well as the spear that's about to come out. When the tank that's tanking Athanel is frozen, make sure you watch his health and keep him topped as much as possible, and if it looks any dangerous, feel free to use pain suppression here. Especially in phase 1 and 2, where your damage is not absolutely necessary and also there's not much healing that's needed to go out, I would pay attention to when beacon is coming up and try to move out before it even gets cast, so that you can prepare to be in a good spot to grip people without getting them cut through the laser if they need help because they messed up. During intermission, there's no enemy target to use to heal with Atonement, as well as a lot of movement being required for certain decrees. So I recommend using your Rapture here and just spamming Power of Shield on people who have a lot of stacks from failing their decrees, as well as the people whose max health is low because they soaked in phase 1. When your max health is low, it's actually very easy to just get one shot from all the orbs being soaked together, since when the orb is completely soaked, it does a little bit of raid damage. So it's definitely a good idea to put Rapture Shields on people who might have 5 or more stacks, even if they look like they are full health. When phase 2 begins, try to do as much DPS as possible, and when the first beacons go out, I would start ramping for your second Evangelism. This is another part where the raid is taking significant damage, and if the Holy Paladin has to go out with the debuff, it's possible that certain people with a lot of stacks might die just from Arcane Mastery. If you lack Warlocks in your raid and you need to do the Dispels, try to reset your Arcane stacks one take before the debuffs actually come out so that you're ready to Dispel as soon as possible. When Dispelling, if your target has lower max health from soaking the wards, make sure that their Arcane stacks drop off before you Dispel, because if they have a bunch of Arcane stacks and lower max health, Dispelling them will one-shot them. When using Mass Dispel, note that you do not have to be in LOS of the person that you're dispelling, but the center of your Mass Dispel does have to be in LOS of the person you're dispelling. After the first Arcane Detonation in phase 2, if you have to dispel again, I recommend getting in position early so that you can dispel as soon as possible. Phase 2 will be ending soon and people have to get to the stacking spot for the intermission, so these dispels have to be done very quickly. For the second dispels, as long as you shield the target before you dispel them, you probably don't need to wait for their Arcane Mastery to drop because they probably reset their stacks during detonation. Beckon comes out right after this, and you have to make sure that by the end of the Beckon that you are in the right spot to begin intermission, or if you have two paladins, you can just spot both targets instead. Second intermission plays a lot like the first, except everybody has lower max health and that there is a target hit to the atonement healing. I recommend popping your Rapture and shielding people even before the decrees begin, and keep spamming shields while you get to the spot that you're supposed to be for your decree. Then use your Radiances into your Evangelism combo. This should be enough to keep people alive, but note that as the orbs are expiring, people who look like they might be at full health might actually die very quickly, so make sure that they use their health stones as necessary, and if you have to stop atonement healing to just put a shield on them so that they survive, make sure you do that too. And if your health ever gets lower than 50%, hit the health stone right away, and it's even okay to use your healing potion here, as well as Desperate Prayer to survive. In phase 3, make sure you're at the spot that you're supposed to be, depending on the strategy that you're using to kill the Nagas. And when Beckon is about to be cast, try to be in a good spot so that even if you're not targeted by the Beckon, you can save people who might be in the wrong spot. The first dispel can be done just like in phase 2. You dispel once their Arcane Mastery stacks drop, and mass dispelling outside of LOS helps prevent damage done to you. When the shields are breaking, try to be in LOS so that you don't take any extra damage, and if you're assigned to use your barrier, make sure you drop it at the right time and place. Once the shield breaks, it might be a good idea to walk out as soon as possible and put a shield on the target that just got hit by the spear, because that person can't LOS the shield as well as having taken the extra physical damage from the spear, so it's very possible that the incoming spear damage will be enough to kill the person. On the spears where it's not breaking a shield, try to focus your healing on anyone that's not at full health, since even if people go down to 20% health, it's not likely that they'll die immediately after from any other source of damage, but the people that are not at full health can easily just die straight up from the spear damage. The second dispels come right before the next Beckon, so if you have to do this dispel, make sure you're in a good spot to dispel the target and move to a safe Beckon spot right away. Because you'll be beckoned right after you dispel, you will not be able to heal yourself up from the dispel damage, so make sure that other people are not dispelled within LOS of you, and if there's a spear coming, it might be a good idea to use Desperate Prayer or ask for an external cooldown. The fourth Beckon, which is the last in this phase, comes right before the next dispels. This is also when spear damage is coming in, so the people who are targeted by this debuff should not move out right away, and make sure that they get healed enough so that they can survive the burst damage before moving out. Phase 3 is all about saving the people that can potentially get one shot. Outside of the tanks, it's really rare that anyone has slow death seers, so make sure that whenever a burst of damage is going to come in, that you put enough resources into people who are in danger of dying. Phase 4 is very simple. You act like any other ranged DPS would, making sure that you bait the portals into the correct spots and dropping your arcane debuffs whenever it is necessary. Make sure you drop barrier when you're assigned for an overload, and on the two portals where it overlaps with Beckon, make sure that you move to a safe spot to grip the target as soon as the portals get baited, since the people who are targeted by the Beckon and can't immune it will start immediately taking portal damage, and without either an external cooldown or a grip, they will 100% die. By moving to a safe spot right as soon as the portals get dropped, you can grip the Beckon target outside of the portal immediately and make sure that they don't die from taking the damage. As long as everyone drops their arcane stacks properly, there isn't much healing required during this phase outside of the overload, so just use your evangelism one of those. Try to DPS the boss as much as possible, and just like in the other phases, let Glimmer heal the raid from all the small bursts of AoE damage coming from the boss, and focus on triaging the raid members that are in danger of getting one shot by the next ability. In this fight, the Disc Priest's job is to make sure that nobody gets one shot by triaging the correct people and using their CDs properly, and DPSing the boss or the ads as much as possible. Don't worry about your HPS at all on this fight, and just make sure that you're healing the correct targets so that nobody dies through the first 3 phases, and during any other time where no one's in danger of dying, put out as much damage as possible. I hope this video helped you kill Mythic Azshara, and I'll see you guys in the next raid.